I'm 27, and the ugliest truth about me is this: I fell in love with a child before I knew he wasn't mine. That's not how you introduce yourself at parties, obviously. You don't shake a stranger's hand and say, "Hi, I'm the guy who learned to braid a toddler's hair from YouTube and only later found out his mom had been engaged to me under a lie." But that's the center of my life now, an off-axis planet I live on, and I need to tell it straight because I'm tired of hearing my own voice in my head make neat excuses. If there's any chance to make sense out of the mess, it probably starts with laying it down like I'm sitting across from you, looking into the camera, letting the words land where they may on your sympathy, your disgust, your judgment, your own scars. I didn't used to be this guy. I used to be solid in a boring steady job, a saving account that actually had savings, a gym membership I used once a week more out of guilt than passion, a beat-up sedan with a stickier/C button, and small routines like meal prep on Sundays and calling my mom on Thursdays after her soap opera. I was the friend who helped you move and actually brought the tape. The guy who, when asked what he wanted in life, said something vanilla like a family unmended, a front stoop, a kid's bike tossed on the grass, a woman who rolled her eyes at my bad puns but laughed anyway. Maybe you're rolling your eyes right now. Fine. But the point is predictable. Safe. I wore the same cologne since high school because why fix what wasn't broken? Then I met her. We'll call her out. I'm not going to do the thing where I make her a villain in every sentence. That would be too easy and honestly dishonest. She was charming in ways that had nothing to do with makeup or angles. She listened like her eyes had gravity. She had this habit of tilting her head when I said something I didn't know mattered to me until I heard it out loud. And when she smiled, it felt like someone cracked a window in a stuffy room. You can hate me for how quickly I fell. It was ridiculous. It was rom-com speed. Within a month we had our groceries in each other's fridges and our toothbrushes sharing a cup. It was the kind of fast that makes irrational friends ask if you're okay, and maybe I wasn't, but I wanted to be. She made being alive feel like the volume had been turned up. I asked her to marry me on a Sunday morning that smelled like burnt toast and coffee. We were in our apartment with a bad water pressure, sunlight coming through those blinds that never open evenly, and I had this speech in my head about how safety isn't boring when it's a person, about how I never wanted to be anywhere she wasn't. In real life I choked. My voice cracked. I dropped the ring because my fingers sweat when I'm nervous due with that information what you will, and it bounced under the stove, and I had to get on the floor and fish it out while she laughed and cried and told me the floor was disgusting. She said yes. Her yes was a warm thing that wrapped around my ribs and squeezed. I'm not exaggerating when I say I started planning our grocery list for retirement that afternoon. I could already see us arguing about brands of cereal at 80. I took a picture of her hand in the sunlight because I wanted to remember the way the stone caught the light, sure, but also because I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't dreaming. The caption in my head was stupid. Something like, "Found my forever roommate." The kind of thing people hate on Instagram. I never posted it. I kept it for me. If you've never planned a wedding, imagine making 24 tiny decisions every day that all cost more than your rent. Linen colors, seating charts, plates you'll never see again, signature cocktails named after inside jokes. Suddenly everyone has opinions: your mother, your barber, your coworker who hasn't had a date in 3 years. There's a spreadsheet, then there are 3, then there's a binder. Oh, love the binder. She would run her fingers down the tabs like a kid counting stickers. I remember thinking, this is us. Look at us building something. And maybe that sounds corny, but it's the truth that mattered. I kept saying yes to vendors because her eyes lit up and because I liked being the man who could make things happen. That might be the first place some of you start to dislike me, like I was playing provider, chest puffed out at inside jokes about budgets. There. I liked the role. It made me feel valuable. And I wasn't being bled dry. I had planned for this. I wanted to spend. I wanted to invest in a day that said, we're doing this all the way. Then the doorbell rang one Tuesday afternoon. That's not when the universe should crack, but mine did. I was on the floor with receipts found out like playing cards and a pencil behind my ear for no reason other than pretending I was the kind of guy who uses pencils. I was meeting a friend for cake tasting. I wasn't worried. You don't get suspicious when you're happy. You don't put locks on a door you don't think anyone will try to open. So when I opened the door and found a man older than me by a few years, face that looked like it had been parked in the sun too long, eyes that were exhausted in a way you only get from lack of sleep and broken plans, I didn't brace myself for anything except maybe a sales pitch for solar panels. He told me his name and that he used to date Elle. I'm not going to pretend I remember precisely how he worded it, but the bones are burned into my brain. He and Elle have a child together. A son. He said he tried to be patient. He said he didn't want to blow up our lives, but we were getting married, and the fact that I didn't know made me a casualty of a lie I didn't deserve. He didn't shout. There was no chest beating. He was frustratingly calm, the kind of calm that made the hallway feel colder. He showed me a photo on his phone, a boy with L's eyes and a calic that refused to behave. He said he carried this around like a pocket secret for 2 years. He said he thought I should know. Then he looked at me like he was sorry, like he pitied me, and if you've ever had someone pity you while they hand you a bomb, you know how fast your dignity can evaporate. Here's the part where I want to rewrite history. I want to tell you I slammed the door. I want to tell you I told him to leave and never come back. But that would be theatre. What happened was worse. I stood there with my mouth open, making small sounds, and then I asked questions. It wasn't elegant. It was messy. Who? When? How old? Does she see him? Do her parents know? Does his mother know? Does anyone know? Are you trying to hurt me? Are you lying? Why would anyone lie like this? He told me Elle had kept the pregnancy from me because we'd broken up for a few months 2 years earlier, and things with him were complicated. And by complicated, he meant off and on, secrets, bad timing. He said he tried to make it work, that they did for a while, that it imploded in the way things implode when two people want opposite lives. He said Elle told him if she met me again afterward, that she wanted a fresh start, and that she swore she would tell me, but every time she tried, she panicked. That's the word he used, to panicked. I didn't know whether to punch him or thank him or laugh in his face. Instead, I told him to leave, and he did, and then I stared at my receipts like they could tell me what to feel. I called Elle. I said I needed her to come home. I paced so hard the neighbor downstairs texted me to knock it off. She walked in and knew. She just knew. Her face did this thing where it tried on 3 expressions at once and landed on none. That night wasn't cinematic. There was no thunder. It was quieter than a funeral. She sat across from me at the small table where we ate takeout, and she told me she was a coward. She told me she was terrified of losing me. She told me she made a decision to tell me after the wedding, to sit me down on our honeymoon. Yes, I wanted to vomit too and finally confess because she couldn't carry it anymore and because we'd be safe. She said she rationalized it 1,000 ways. I had said I wanted to be a dad. I love routine. I could handle complicated. I was kind. I would step up. She told herself that once I knew, I'd see that the boy was a blessing, a ready-made family for a man who wanted one. She also told herself I might leave if I knew before the wedding, and she couldn't bear that, not when everything felt like an animal that would run if you moved too fast. You can call her a manipulator. You can call me an idiot for considering any of it. I won't stop you. She cried, but it wasn't performative. Elle is a lot of things, but she's not a good actress. I could tell she had used up entire nights trying to rewrite the script of her life. She admitted the boy was 2 and some months, that she had been in contact with his father for logistics and doctor visits and the math of childcare, that her parents knew this part hurt worse than the rest for reasons I still can't fully map, and that they thought she was going to tell me. I remember staring at my hands and feeling like they didn't belong to me. I remember my heart being too physical, pounding against bone like it was trying to crack out. I remember the second one my mind tried to split into, one part tracking logistics, where's this kid, what's his routine, who tucks him in, and the other part wanting to walk into the dark and keep walking. I called off the engagement the next morning because I couldn't breathe around the ring on her finger. I packed a bag and left the apartment because everything looked like a lie and also like home, which was a special kind of cruel. My mother asked questions that were too soft to handle. My best friend looked at me like I'd failed an exam I didn't know we were taking. Some people in my circle said what you might be thinking right now, you dodged a bullet. Thank God you found out before the wedding. Others were kinder, or crueler, depending on your angle. She's scared. People make mistakes. Maybe this is one you can forgive. Maybe this is the kind of story you tell your kids later about how you almost blew it. And there I was in the middle, an uncommitted juror in my own trial, replaying scenes, collecting evidence, measuring anger against love like they were units of the same currency. Here's the part I need you to sit with before you decide whether you hate me or not. I met a boy. I told myself I needed to, for clarity, for closure, pick a C word, any C word, but the truth is that I needed to see whether my heart would betray me. He was smaller than the photo made him look. He had a way of hanging back with those big watchful eyes kids have when they are used to reading rooms before they step into them. He liked trucks. He liked lining them up and then crushing them. He had a laugh that worked on me like a drug. I'm not going to pretend I didn't resent him at first. Resentment is a rotten emotion that wears 100 masks, and one of them looks like protectiveness. I wanted to be mad at him, and I couldn't, so the anger boomeranged back at me. I told myself a story about what real men do. They walk away. They don't let themselves be drafted into someone else's war. They protect their future. They draw lines. They don't let a lie build a home inside them. And yet, I found myself asking about his bedtime, his favorite cup, whether he'd had any ear infections. And I talked like colleagues over a fragile project. We were careful like people walking across a frozen lake. I set boundaries because everyone told me to, because I had to prove I wasn't a doormat. But boundaries are theoretical until they meet a small person who smiles at you like you're the best part of their day. The second time I saw him, he handed me a book and then looked up like, "Well." He leaned into me when we read. He patted my chest absent-mindedly with his small hand the way kids do when they get comfortable, as if checking to see if the person is real. I felt something give way in me like a knot loosening, and I hated it and loved it at the same time. I left that day and sat in my car and cried like a cliché. I don't cry often. I don't say that to be macho. I say it because the tears took me by surprise. It felt like grief for a life that was dissolving and love for a life I had no right to want. People talk a lot about loyalty like it's simple. You pick a team and you stay there. But what happens when the field splits and your heart is standing in the crack? Asked if we could try couples therapy. I said no and yes in the same breath. I wanted to punish her. I wanted to save us. Every session was a mirror I didn't want to look into. I learned words like a trauma bond and avoidant attachment and a cognitive dissonance, and I nodded like an attentive student while my stomach burned. The therapist asked me who I wanted to be in this story. Not what I wanted to happen. Who I wanted to be. That question still haunts my mornings. I wanted to be the man who doesn't confuse love with self-abandonment. I also wanted to be the man who doesn't make a child pay for an adult's mistake. Those two guys turned out to be terrible roommates. I did the adult things. I asked for a paternity test because I am not completely naive. It came back clear, the father was the man at my door. The science was sharp as a blade, and somewhere I had hoped for blur. Blame me for that. It's easier to live with the fog than with the scalpel. I told Elle we were done for real, not the kind of done people use as leverage. I moved out. I returned the deposits I could, lost the ones I couldn't, cancelled the binder like it was a magazine subscription. My bank account looked like a mugshot. People stopped calling as much because breakups are contagious and no one wants to catch yours. My apartment smelled like new paint and cardboard. I started sleeping with the TV on because silence got loud at 2 a.m. I dated a little badly. I told a woman the truth on the second date because it felt like a test I had to give myself. Would anyone stick around after I said I still saw my ex's kids sometimes? She didn't. She paid her half and hugged me like a cousin at a funeral, and I don't blame her. Everyone is allowed their own boundaries. And the boy? He started calling me a nickname that was one syllable and ended in a vowel, and it gutted me. No one coached him. It just happened, the way kids stick words onto people like labels that mean more than they sound. I tried to visit on a schedule that didn't make me feel like I was living two lives, but I was. There's no clean way to be the man you were supposed to be and the man you became because of a lie. I learned his daycare teacher's name. I went to a park that smelled like hot rubber and cut grass. I watched him try to conquer the sly and then chicken out and then conquer it anyway with triumph so pure it made adults clap. A couple of times parents assumed I was his dad and asked about milestones, and I nodded because it was easier, and then I drove home resenting myself. That's your cue to call me weak. You'd be right. I didn't owe strangers my story, but I also didn't owe myself that comfortable lie. Every time I took the easy nod I felt like I was stealing a title. And money, since everyone wants to know about money. No, I didn't pay child support. I wasn't legally obligated, and I drew that line because some lines are the scaffolding that keep a building from collapsing under the weight of good intention. But I bought groceries when I was there. I sent a box of winter clothes once because I saw a sale and because it felt wrong to ignore a need I could meet. Sometimes I paid for the little things, the museum tickets, the ice creams, the stupid overpriced dinosaur hoodie that made him roar at the mirror. And sometimes I forced myself not to, even when Elle looked tired, because I was terrified of being turned into the wall with a face. I don't know if I got that balance right. Honestly, I probably didn't. People will hear this and say, pick a lane, man. I wish lanes existed. It felt more like a gravel road with no lines and a cliff on either side. You want a villain? Some days it was me. I checked Elle's phone once while she was in the shower during that limbo before I moved out. My hand shook, not from fear of being caught but from the ugliness of the act. I told myself I needed the truth, and then I used that excuse like an all-access pass. There were messages to the father about pickup times and coughs and shoes that didn't fit. There were also messages that looked like they were trying to be friends and failing. Nothing romantic that night, which somehow made me feel worse because it meant the worst betrayal was still the one staring me in the face. She had decided for me. She had played God with my future. She had made me the last to know in my own life. I put the phone back, sat on the edge of the tub, and hated the person I was becoming, the kind who searches for reasons to stay angry because anger is easier than sorrow. You can throw anger at someone. Sorrow just sits with you, slow and sticky. I thought about legal routes. Would I become a guardian of some sort? Would that be fair to anyone? Would it be fair to him? I watched videos about attachment theory at 1 a.m. like a cramming student preparing for a test no one else was taking. I read articles about the non-biological father figures until my eyes burned. There's no clean box for this. Every story I found either ended with a tidy reunification or a dramatic cut-off and a moral that tied a bow around chaos. My story just kept being. Elle and I established rules like a treaty between small countries. He would call his father Dad. I would be the nickname. No overnight stays for a while. Transparency about schedules. Holidays belonged to the family that had the name on the birth certificate. Then we started breaking rules because life does that. A stomach flu that lasted 5 days. A work emergency. A car that wouldn't start. I stepped in, stepped back, stepped in again. Every step felt like I was leaving a footprint on wet cement, and every retreat felt like I was digging a hole with a spoon. That's how double lives really feel, not glamorous, not adrenaline spiked, but exhausting. Spreadsheets of logistics, calendars with color codes, the nagging sense that every compromise you make is either noble or stupid, and you won't know which until hindsight gets mean. Elle started dating because of course she did. The man was older, stable, easy to like in that way people are when they don't make waves. He didn't have the crackle that Elle and I had, and maybe that's the point. I met him twice, civil, careful interactions that made me feel like a co-workers plus one at an office party. He shook my hand and asked what I did for work. I told him. He nodded like he respected it. I'm not proud of the jealousy that rose up like acid. It's not a heroic emotion. It made me petty. It made me think of cutting off the visits just to reassert control over something. I didn't. I kept showing up, partly because a tiny voice in me kept whispering, be the adult you wish you had, and partly because I didn't know how to stop without hurting someone who didn't deserve it. I don't want to imply Elle was deliberately cruel every day. She was it. She sent me videos of the boy learning to say new words, of him dancing in that chaotic toddler way where knees and elbows and gravity are suggestions. She once left a coffee on my doorstep on a morning when she knew I slept in my car outside their house because the city had shut down our street for construction and I'd been too tired to drive across town. She wrote thank you on the lid. These small mercies kept me tied. They were also part of the problem. Kindness mixed with guilt is a glue you don't see until it hardens. One afternoon in early spring, he fell on the sidewalk and split his lip. There was blood in a way that always looks worse than it is. He cried the panicked cry of kids who don't yet know that pain has an end. I carried him inside, hands sticky, his face pressed against my shoulder. He stopped howling when I started humming. I don't sing. I hummed some commercial jingle that had been stuck in my head, and it worked. He hiccuped against my t-shirt and said my nickname into my collarbone like a question that he already knew the answer to. If you're waiting for me to say that was the moment I chose, it wasn't that clean. It was a moment in a necklace of moments that added up to something I couldn't call back. People online love the word boundaries. I respect the word. I wish the heart respected it more. By summer, I found myself living with a split calendar, my days and the days that belonged to this strange, almost not mine orbit. There were mornings when I'd wake up and reach for my phone to see if Elle had texted a video before my first coffee, which made me angry because I didn't want her voice to be the first in my head. There were evenings when I'd tell friends I couldn't go out because I had plans, and I could feel their curiosity or judgment through the group chat silence. And there were nights when I would hold firm and not go over, not answer, not slide back into the easy closeness we sometimes found when the boy was asleep and the dishes were stacked and we were just two people in a quiet room pretending we hadn't chatted. We never crossed that line again. I need you to know that. We were not on again, off again lovers. We were something weirder, exes whose lives were braided together by a small person who didn't understand why grown-ups complicate the simple equation of love. Then came the email, a wedding invitation that wasn't mine. Al was getting married. Her new last name looked wrong to me in black serif font. I read the location, the dress code, the RSVP link, as if repetition could make it normal. It wasn't a surprise. I had watched it happen in slow motion, like a glass sliding off a table, and still the crash was loud. She asked if I wanted to come for the ceremony for closure, a word people love when they want you to cosign your own sadness. I declined. I sent a gift that felt safe, something for the kitchen because it's easier to feed a home than to feed a wound. The boy wore a small suit in the photo she later sent. He looked like he was pretending to be a tiny senator. He didn't understand the ceremony, he understood the cake. It for him. I stared at the photos until they became shapes. Then I went to the gym and pushed my body until my brain shut up. I'd like to tell you that was my turning point. That I stopped visiting. That it was the shock I needed to reclaim my life. Sometimes I think it should have been. Sometimes I think that would have been the brave, clean cut. But bravery looks different on different days. He started preschool. He asked for me by name some afternoons. You can judge me for going. You can judge me for staying away on the days I said no. Both are valid. Both felt like betrayals of different promises. I started writing down small details in my phone, like I could justify my presence with data. The first time he said the alphabet without skipping letters, the Tuesday he slept with his arms thrown over his head like a superhero, the exact wording of the way he combined two words I didn't know he knew into a sentence that made my chest warm. I'm not his father. But my phone is full of him. If you're wondering where his father is in this, he's there. He picks up. He drops off. He sends snacks in a backpack. He's not a ghost. He's a man trying, with the same human limitations as the rest of us, and sometimes our eyes meet across a doorway and we acknowledge each other with the small grim nod of people who share a problem but not a solution. We've had a couple of awkward conversations about lines and roles. I don't want to take his title or his authority. I don't want to be a replacement. I don't want to be a shadow either. We're men who learned, late, that masculinity has fewer scripts than we were promised. We are writing as we go, and sometimes our pens scratch. If you're waiting for me to justify her, to rehabilitate her image in your mind, or to stump on it, this is where I lose some of you. I loved Elle. I probably always will in a section of my heart I've put up caution tape around. She did a cruel thing. Not the worst thing humans do to each other, but a fundamental one. She decided for me. She made me a supporting actor in my own life and hoped I'd be grateful for the part. She also loved me. She also told herself 1,000 lies to avoid telling me one catastrophic truth. You can hold those two things at once and they tear your hands up. The day I watched her marry someone else in a photo, I didn't wish her unhappiness. I didn't wish her lightning. I wished her calm. I wished her the version of family she's been building with spreadsheets since the day she learned how to plan. That wish doesn't erase the bruise. The bruise is permanent. You can press it and the pain flickers, but it's part of the map of me now. There's a night I think about like a bruise you can't stop touching. It was winter, the kind of cold that makes city air feel like metal. I'd had a long day. Work was chaos. A client reamed me out for a mistake that wasn't mine but should have been caught by me anyway. I missed my bus and walked home because it felt like punishment and medicine at the same time. Al texted that the boy had asked if I could read him the truck book. I said no. I said I was tired. I said I needed a night to be a person with unimportant problems, laundry, leftovers, the low-grade hum of a TV show with 7 seasons. She typed that it was fine. No guilt trip. No manipulation. Just okay. And an hour later I put on my shoes and went anyway. That's the night he fell asleep against me and snored a little whistling snore, and I sat there in the dark and stared at nothing and felt both saintly and stupid. That's the part of the story some of you will quote to prove I'm soft in the head. Maybe I am. The thing about love, and let me be clear, it is love, not duty, not guilt, not habit, is that it doesn't check your resume. You might be wondering whether I ever got my life back. I did, in the way you get back a house after a flood. The walls are the same, but the paint is different, and there's a waterline on the garage that will never fade. I work. I sleep. I see friends. I go on dates that sometimes make it to a third dinner when I tell the truth and watch for the flinch. I have a plant I haven't killed yet. I bought a better second-hand car that doesn't smell like an old gym bag. I stopped saving wedding inspiration photos and started saving recipes because it turns out I like cooking alone with music too loud. I also keep a plastic dinosaur in my glove compartment because he once left it in my car and I told him the T-Rex was visiting his car house. Now I rotate it back to him every few weeks as if we were running an errand for toys. That's ridiculous. That's my life. If you were hoping for an answer, I don't have one for you that you can frame. I have days when I'm proud of myself for not becoming bitter. I have days when I'm disgusted with myself for being the guy who couldn't walk away from a situation that makes outsiders make the same face people make when someone drinks milk after the expiration date. I have late nights when I imagine the alternate version of me married, a different kid, a different home, a different Tuesday, and I mourn him like a brother I never met. I have early mornings when I feel light, when I make a good cup of coffee and stretch and remember that my life is not a punishment, it's just a different path through the same woods we're all lost in. Do I forgive her? I don't know. Some days yes, some days I take it back. Forgiveness sounds like a diploma, and I didn't attend the classes. Do I resent him? No. He didn't pick any of this. He picked trucks and pasta with butter and the same book 3 times in a row. Do I resent his father? Not really. He has his own math to do. Do I resent myself? That's the hardest one. I resent the version of me who didn't ask questions because he liked the way happiness fit. I resent the version of me who cared more about the binder being full than the story it was trying to cover. But worse than resentment is the tender fact that I like the man I am with this kid in my life. He makes me kinder in the day-to-day, more patient with old ladies in line, more likely to show up even when I'm tired. And if you think that's a consolation prize, you're not wrong. It's also the only prize I care about. So here I am, saying it out loud the way I promised myself I would if I ever got brave enough to stop hiding behind good posture and understatement. I'm not asking for your pity or your applause. I'm not auditioning for sainthood. I'm also not inviting stones unless you need to throw them to make sense of your own history. People love binary endings. He's a sucker or a hero. She's a witch or a wounded bird. The father is a deadbeat or a saint. The child is a pawn or a miracle. All of that sometimes in rotation. What I know is that I continue to be a man who drives across town with a plastic dinosaur in his glove box because a small boy once trusted me with his nap. I know that I proposed to a woman who said yes with her whole face. I know that, in the rubble of what we built, there's still a door I knock on now and then, not because of her but because of the small person who claps when he sees me like someone just turned on the light. And here is the sentence that will divide you, the one that will make you argue in the comments or shake your head or nod despite yourself. I'm raising someone else's son. And she married another. And I still don't know which of us is the real fool.